I never feel, especially when I know the person, I never feel a normal intro into these. You know, that kind of was like, oh, well, Mike Sheridan, welcome to the show. There's no normal way of
being your Radio 1 voice.
Even though we were like chatting just before I hit record. What's the difference? Like, there's no fucking, there's, you know, there's, it jars with me when it's somebody I know too, like going, okay, Mike, we're about to go live. You know, just after switching from talking the most horrific shit back and forth. But in fairness, you had like you've found the perfect balance. I'm a big admirer of your interview, even though I know you hate compliments, but your interview style, there's for the want of a better phrase, there's a coziness to it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like you're crowbar and the ball, like you're talking to major people where you could very easily slip into, you know, Alan Partridge, but you don't, like, you know what I mean? There's still very much Irish Mike is chatting to the fucking director of the CIA, like.
Yeah, I've always just tried to kind of get people comfortable speaking to them, because I find if you're like I had Sean Spicer on last week, right? And I would disagree with Sean Spicer, and I'd say pretty much everything, at least in terms of ideology and politics and stuff, right? So there's no point in me talking to Sean Spicer, him agreeing to do my show, and then me just like stopping him from speaking, interrupting him. Well, I think this, well, I think that. So I let him finish, and I countered and then moved on, because you get stuck in a loop. But the point being, if somebody's comfortable enough to have a conversation with you, you can get them comfortable to say something that they mean. That makes way more sense than contradicting them, stopping them, interrupting them, and then trying to pull one word they said from that to be something of substance. So, like, if I'm speaking to somebody who's an actor or somebody who is involved in politics, I try and treat them all the very same way. Now, like, that can be disconcerting for some people because they're kind of waiting on that moment.
Yeah, that's what
So I would always say this, because with somebody filming now, since I started with Buzz, I've got a cameraman shooting 2 cameras this side. I would have operated them myself, which was great crack. But what I've had to say to him is, I'm like, look, just hit record the second I start going. So the second is like, I'm doing the same thing you're doing now. I'm doing majority of them are Zoom interviews. So I'm just hit record and we'll start a conversation, and we'll hopefully have a natural point where we can start the show can start then at some point, and the person doesn't feel like they're on, you know, they're under spotlights and they haven't switched on, they haven't turned that switch. So it's always how I've tried to approach doing interviews now. Like, it's probably to my detriment in some respects as well, because I'm not that like, hey, you're very welcome along to. I do a little intro, like I have auto cue if I need it, but I've never used it, and not for the show. So I just want things to feel natural and authentic, and if they don't, it just makes me cringe. That's why you see so many like movie junkets where people are trying to remember verbatim what the question they had written down, and if they lose their train of thought, it goes sideways quick. So I just try and get on people's level, whoever I'm talking to, and you kind of get more of an insight to the person as well if it's a conversation, as opposed to if it's an interview. Like, that's just what I've always found.
Yeah, because the junket thing always struck me, like, at the face value, when you see really good people in the interviews that you see clips of on YouTube and stuff, you go, oh, well, that looks lovely. But no doubt you for the day, they're sitting there asking and answering the same fucking thing over and over. Like,
it's such a strange, like, I've done 2 virtual ones since I started with Buzz, and like in Robbie Amell and Henry Cavill, and they're just random, like in a virtual waiting room with like randomers you've never met, and then all of a sudden somebody clicks something, and then you're sitting and Henry Cavill's looking at you like, how are you? You know, so it's weird. It's even more surreal than it was in the hotels, but it's an art form being good at that stuff. I think Serena Bellissimo on Spin, she's phenomenal at it. She just, because she presents live radio, so she knows hit cues and that type of stuff. But Serena must be held a record for the most amount of junket interviews in Ireland, I'd say. So she's a master at it. I try and do the same thing if I have 5 minutes with Henry Cavill, or if I have half an hour with John Brennan or whoever it is. I try and be like, oh, so, and then if they're in a surreal setup with, you know, a junket setup in a hotel in London, and Clarges in London, it's even harder for them to kind of get on the conversational level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for anybody wondering what junket is, no, I don't profess to be it. It's, if anybody remembers, was it Love Actually? No, Notting Hill. It was the one where he's waiting outside the room in the hotel corridor, and he was horse and hound, or horse and country was basically So
it's not far off that, to be honest.
Yeah, because I can only imagine what the waiting room is like going, all right. Because you don't want to spill any beans like while chatting to other people like either. But
yeah, they're just surreal. They're like people I've when you look at the people I've interviewed over my career, like it's not as impressive as it looks because so many of them are junkets, at least in terms of the movie stars. And I don't at least for me and how I do things, I don't include those as proper interviews or as proper conversations just because they're so, unless you've got a decent amount of time with somebody, they're very staged and it's hard for them not to be. And it's not the person you're speaking to's fault. There's a studio involved. There's a very expensive publicist involved. There's a whole kind of rigmarole kind of stopping the conversation from happening naturally. So and they need to talk about the film and you need to talk about the film and you might have 6 minutes. And it's just a bit more surreal now when you're doing it from your spare room, I suppose, than when you would have had to get on a plane before. Like,
because you always struck me as somebody that was fierce, genuine, as you said, almost to your detriment. Like, and I would strive to be that as much, and it is definitely been to my detriment. I know that for a fact. That I should definitely, I maybe should lead more, leaning into what the media is looking for rather than what I'm offering more than anything else. But like, to your core, you've always struck me as somebody like that. Even like back when you took up MMA for that, for that TV show that time, like you're about to get your whole handed to you. Do you know what I mean? But for journalistic reasons, as well as I'm sure there was personal reasons too. Like you wanted to give it a crack. Like,
yeah, it's one of those. I think with Barbara Gentleman with the doc, that was we were close to making a couple of TV shows around UFC and around MMA. They didn't happen for a couple of reasons after Barbaric Gentleman. But the point being, I was looking to go down that route, and I didn't feel like I could talk about mixed martial arts in any sort of way with credibility without having done it.
Yeah.
And that's not to, talk poorly of people that, there are plenty of commentators in mixed martial arts who are very good. And just from my own perspective, I feel like there's a certain amount of empathy with color commentary that you need to, if somebody's in a position that's clearly painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
A joke or something like that. You need to have experienced that. And there's a guy called Robin Black, who's an MMA analyst, very, very good MMA analyst from Canada, who says the very same thing. And he did the same thing. He did it much later than me. He went and had a few fights and was able to kind of understand the perspective of somebody when they're in a certain position. So that was kind of the thinking behind that. And also, like, I grew up in a fairly rough area on the north side of Dublin, and I didn't learn how to fight properly until I was in my late 20s, 30 odd. And it's amazing the kind of confidence that it gives you. And I always say this, like, a lot of the lads I train with over the years are like, they're sweethearts, they're nerds, like they're not the typical hardshell aggro types that you think they are at all. And that's something that I always try to get across, especially with the documentary. And it just kind of gives you a certain amount of confidence and a certain amount of confidence in that, you're not, worried about walking past a group of lads. Like, I grew up in Coolock, in a place called Mofew on the north side of Dublin. And like, to say it was rough. Now, I still have some of my best mates who I grew up with, and we're also mates that, I grew up with there, but it was bad. And there's so many videos going around now I get sent on, those WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
And they're like Snapchat videos of what's happening in Mofew right now. And I'm like showing my girlfriend, I'm like, here, Joe, look, this is where I used to live. And she's like, Jesus Christ, why are you setting that car on fire? So I just wish my big regret with mixed martial arts is not having the confidence to do it when it was much, much younger. I was really sporty growing up, but I never I didn't have the balls, I don't think, to go and actually try it, because everybody should get punched in the face once in their life.
Yeah.
It's no harm.
But why wasn't even big, like, you know what I mean? Because I remember speaking to people about doing mixed martial arts years ago, but it literally was that. It was mixed martial arts. I had a taekwondo background, other lads had a judo background and stuff like that. We didn't technically know what the fuck we were doing, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it was the explosion of it then, maybe 5 years later, it actually formed as a sport, and it'll probably end up being an Olympic sport at some stage. But was there even that option? Had you a boxing club nearby or anything like that?
Karate club and stuff like that nearby, and I think I tried that, but I gravitated towards GA when I was young, and played a lot of football and stuff when I was young. And that's just like any kid, like you're kind of doing what your mates are doing, and you're leaning towards the type of sports they're doing because it's a social thing at that stage. And Like genetically, I was quite lucky with being able to lose weight and stuff quickly for the sport. And like don't get me wrong, it's not easy. But I'm what the analyst in the Irish Strength Institute would have said, John, he's a master's in that stuff, in nutrition and fitness and all that stuff. And he was like, you're carb tolerant, so you can lose weight quite quickly. So genetically, I'm quite lucky. But can also put it on quite quickly as well, I think. But
so you're the most Irish person ever. You can eat as many spuds as you want, and
as many spuds as I want, and no matter how much sun I get, either be red or completely pale. One or the other, like. But yeah, I haven't trained now in a couple of years. So since the start of all this nonsense, so I do miss it. Like I'm looking at the lads I trained with, all getting graded into their brown belts and stuff now, and I never graded in jiu-jitsu because I'm like I joke with one of the lads, Danny, saying I like car park brawls. You know, I've got like 90. Not that I've ever done it, but we've got like 90 seconds of pure power in the tank, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And the lads would have all been a lot more technical than me. Would have, you know, wore the suit a lot more, would have wore the gi a lot more, and I just wanted to go in and grapple and fight.
Yeah.
And, which is probably why I have like cauliflower ear and broken nose and all that stuff. So I didn't learn a huge amount other than how to kind of handle myself ultimately, I suppose. Like, so I was never going pro, you know, put it that way.
The jiu-jitsu thing is unbelievable, isn't it? Like, can you even be an entrepreneur nowadays if you don't do jiu-jitsu? Do you know what I mean? It seems to just, and you like, because for some reason, I'm guessing because my age profile and everything else, my feed seems to be full of people giving advice on shit. I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do with any of this. You know what I mean? They're like, you got to hustle. You got to be up at fucking 4 a.m. And you got to, I'm like, oh,
yeah, it's really, because I've spoken to a few people who would be really big in that space over the years. And like Jordan Peterson would be one. I interviewed him a few years ago, and he's obviously huge in that space. Now, maybe not in a kind of aggressive way, in a bit more of a cerebral way. But, and I just did a tour with Rory O'Connor and Ray Goggins. From Hell Week. And like Ray is very much in that space, you know, and I think it's when it's the person who's saying this stuff, if you understand their background and understand where they're coming from and how they've implemented it in their lives. Like Ray was special forces, is stationed in Afghanistan, Pakistan, like seen some shit, you know, like he's like an amazing.
It's hard to compare, isn't it, to somebody growing up in fucking Fox Rock. Exactly,
and he's using those tools now. I mean, some of the more entrepreneurial stuff, like I'm a bit like, it just doesn't appeal to me. I'm like, look, I get it. I have friends who are obsessed with it, like with the likes of Gary Vee, and who'd be like top of that food chain, I suppose. Like I understand it, but it's not for me. Like the amount of those times I've spoken to those people, and I'm like, I did actually say the phrase, I probably shouldn't have, but I did actually say the phrase on stage in Vicar Street. One of the pillars that we were talking about was what was it? Visualization.
Okay.
That's a bit wanky, isn't it?
It is, though. In all fairness, fair play to you, because I guarantee you 60% of the audience are thinking the same thing.
To me, it's just like, did you watch? Like, look, again, I appreciate it works for people, but for me, it never really went in, you know. But yeah, I get the same thing on like when you're scrolling on social media, I get the same mates sharing that stuff. My brother's obsessed with all that stuff as well. But somebody like Jordan Peterson, I can understand a little bit more. There's a psychology behind. He's a clinical psychologist.
Yes, yeah.
Like regardless of whatever you think about the man, like he's a clinical psychologist and has a background in this stuff, and you know, kind of speaking to people. But yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't. It never really landed with me. Like,
yeah, there's a couple of lads. When I worked in construction, it was the early days of that, and this would have been the height of the boom. And, you know, we're all kind of site managers and stuff. And I had friends who would have visualization boards and stuff, and they were reading The Secret. And I just went, can you not just go to fucking work? Yeah, just go to work and just obsessed with this stuff and reading Tony Robbins and shit like that. You're going, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
and fascinating characters, like they are, like to see that the followings that these people build are almost cult, like, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, again, it becomes everything, and you'd be at the coalface of seeing these kind of things, but so many things become, whose team are you on? You know, like if you just put Jordan Peterson, he cuts straight to the bone is what the major problem with that man is, or for people, is that there's no fluff around what he says. He actually reads like instructions for building something.
Yeah, he can be
he's clear, he must be on some form of spectrum, because he doesn't care about people's emotions in the conversation. He just cuts straight to the point and gives you the reasoning around it, which I can absolutely see. but for some reason he's been made totally political. And it seems like everything is whose team are you on nowadays?
Yeah, it's a weird space, because when we had him over, it was in the studio at the time. It was in 2018, and his show was the following night in Tree Arena. Now his show was with Douglas Murray and Sam Harris as well.
Right. Oh yeah.
It was a weird, like, they invited us along, so myself and my girlfriend went along, and it was a weird setup. And like, I hadn't really, like, I read Jordan's book before I interviewed him, and I really enjoyed interviewing him. I really liked talking to him. But the night itself was strange. Like Douglas Murray came out and made a crack about something, and it's this like really posh English lad making a crack about something on our audience. And you know what I mean? The fucking Fields of Baton Roy just started coming up.
Come out, G Black and Tans, come out.
Again, but that's the theme thing. So that was strange. And I think it's how he's been marketed to some degree. And like, I think he's a very cerebral, smart man. And I think he's a very sensitive man. Like, I spoke to his daughter last year as well. And he's doing this huge tour again now. He's doing it again now. Next year, he's going to do Tree Arena again. So I think he's one of those people that, like, and this is the problem, I think, nowadays with kind of traditional media and independent media, like what you're doing and what, like, I'm doing to some degree, is that there's no snippet, really. You really have to pay attention and listen to a conversation, or listen to the whole of what somebody's saying to understand what they're saying. And otherwise, it's very, very easy to take things out of context, or to, like, something could be said in a very sloppy way. Something could be articulated in a very, very sloppy way. And then you're cancelled. You know, like, you just and then what happens then, I feel, is, and I've seen this happen to people, is that as soon as there's pushback, or, you know, there's kind of a gang up on social media or wherever it is, all that does is push people further and further to the, like, right and off the cliff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, the vaccine's not working, it's all bullshit, COVID's a lie. You know, like, it's all, I've seen that happen with so many people, because the only people who are embracing them, or who appear to be, at least on the surface, who are trying to understand, oh yeah, look, you just made a mistake, are those people. Are those people that are a little bit, you know, more on the right side of politics, at least. Like, but it comes back to that thing of sides. It's all mental. Like, most people understand nuance, and, you know, are individuals. Like,
yeah, because I wonder that, like, I don't know anybody. I don't think I know anybody who's that much staunch. On the odd time I've met somebody like that and they've kind of revealed themselves to me, I'm going, oh, you give a shit about that, do you? Because I just care about the mortgage, to be honest with you, like, and just telling some dick jokes. That's about it, really. You kind of nearly made to feel a bit of a fucking Egypt for not giving a bollocks. But I can almost say I can't think of anybody who's that way inclined. So it would seem it's a smaller minority, is it?
Yeah, like, I think the small minority but their vocal is the thing. Like, whatever side, quote unquote, side you're on. I think the vast majority of people, like Bill Burr's been really smart about this. You listen to how he talks about it. Like, he's actually really succinct in how he speaks about it. He's like, look, 85% of people don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
You know, like, and he travels the countries, he's a touring comedian like yourself, he's traveling around America, and, like, understands the different points of views and the different perspectives, or at least hears them, and realizes that most people aren't extreme. Like, the media have a massive, massive part to play in that. And because they're reinforcing the same point over and over again. And generally speaking, this is somebody, I've been in media for 15 years. The alarmist stuff, you know, gets the best traction. That's fact. And now for 2 years straight, it's been nothing but alarmist stuff. So at a certain point, you know, people kind of consciously or subconsciously pick sides, I think. And even though really they mightn't quite understand it, but I feel more accepted by these people, so I'm going to lean that way. Or I feel more accepted by these people. Or, like, you see so many things, I've seen it happen so many times online, where it's always the, like, who's Army Hammer. Like, there's so much shit going around about Army Hammer, you know, and we won't go into it because we don't want to get sued. There's so much stuff going around about him online, and it was interesting because he was one of those, appeared to be one of those, like, super woke, you know, like, would always felt the need to point that out. Always felt the need to say, and those are the ones I'm always a bit cautious.
Oh, to abs 100%. Anybody who's shouting,
just do the right thing. You don't have to point that out every 2 minutes. You know,
we shouldn't be murdering people, guys. Oh, he definitely has murdered somebody. Yeah, you definitely have. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's revealed itself in the comedy world a few times, like, where there's people going, guys, come on, and you're like, there's something not certain. Oh, 6 months later, I see. You know, a few things have kind of come to the surface. You're like, like, you were shouting a bit too much there now.
Yeah, that public facing, you know, front, and the actual reality of what that person is like, I'm sure, in the in the day-to-day. Like I've seen that, and that's something that kind of has always frustrated me. And not that exactly, but just that kind of inauthentic way of kind of handling yourself on social media and trying to project something that you're not, or just that it's always felt really cringe to me, and I've never been able to. And look, again, to my detriment, probably. I haven't been able to do it.
Oh, no,
I couldn't live with myself, and I'm sure you're the same.
100%. It's something, and sometimes I get not annoyed with mates of mine who are kind of sharing things. I'm like, oh, for the love of Jesus, do I have to explain? Like, and then I find myself turning into that dickhead, going, do I have to explain myself? But I'm at least mature enough now to just walk away and just go, oh, for fuck's sake, why are you buying into that absolute dose? Like, and then when I meet the person in person and I explain it, they're like, oh, I didn't see it like that at all. I'm like, oh, trust me. That's an absolute douchebag that you're hanging, that you're promoting there. Like, you should really, really wind it back in a bit, because I can't get my head around. And especially since moving back to the country, when you're meeting guys here who they're the most raw version of a human. They have none of the layers that we have whatsoever. Like, I met a guy the other day. He's just cool, and he doesn't know he's cool. He's got one eye. You know what I mean? He's just ridiculously cool old bastard, but has nothing. Like, he does chainsaw carvings, not for money, not to put on Instagram, just because they're cool. And he doesn't have a wife nor child or nothing. He's just got him and his dog, his gun and his chainsaw. And you're like, that's it. That's top. That's it. And the guy has, and do you know what? He doesn't realize, on some level, he doesn't realize he has it made. He has it fucking made. No mortgage, no nothing, just has a couple of fucking cows, and that's it. He's like, but he's the most content person. Mike, you've never met somebody. I met him for first time in 20 years. I met him, and you've never met somebody just radiantly content with life. He's like, I got my fags, got a few pints, got the dog. What more? And you're like, yeah, what more is actually needed? You're right.
Yeah, it's like, you don't ask his opinion on Donald Trump, because I'm sure he doesn't give a fuck.
Not one shit.
Stuff. Like, he's just, and like, this ignorance is bliss to some degree, like, it's like you can know too much, like there can be too much information. So to be somebody who's just living their lives in a very like individual, content way, like, that's the dream. It's like the red pill or the blue pill in the Matrix, isn't it?
It is.
I'm just gonna, whatever else is going on, I don't even need to know about. Like, it's all good for me. Like,
well, it's that apocalypse thing, where everybody goes back to nature. This guy's already there. Nothing would change for him if there was a big EMT strike. Like, he would just go, okay, so this flip phone doesn't work anymore. That's fine. That's fine.
I mean, I'm not huge on social media. Like, I've got it. Like, I have to use it for work, and I've always had to use it for work. But I found it the most. That's been difficult. I think the last couple of years has been social media. I think it's hurt more in the pandemic than it's helped, because I think there's too much information, there's too much noise, and no matter what one scientist seems to say, there seems to be another scientist with something else. There's, the science is unfolding in real time around COVID. The pandemic has been reported like breaking. Every second tweet is breaking. Every second tweet is new variant cases or whatever, and it has people on this constant like state of alertness and just what next. It's this weird low level anxiety that hasn't gone away for fucking 2 years, and it's not good for you. And so I'm envious of that chap with the one eye and the fucking dog.
There's a lot to be said for it.
Swear to God, there's definitely something in that.
Well, even I was talking with the lads, the two Johnnies. They just did a thing for Aer Lingus over in Nebraska. And I was talking with Johnny B last night. What was the crack, man? You were at full stadiums, full bars, full. He goes, man, there's no COVID. There's no COVID in them places. I said, there is. He goes, oh no, there fucking is. But just, the boys went to Madison Square Gardens, packed. Not a mask, not a certain or nothing.
I was in Madison Square Garden a few weeks ago. But this was in early November. I went to New York for a few days, and my girlfriend loved it. Went to see Bill Maher over there.
Class.
In the smaller room in Madison Square Garden, and there was a Dave Matthews Band concert on in the main room, the 20,000 seater room. And New York is a funny one because it's been so politicized in America that if you wear a mask, it's seen as a political statement, which is just strange. But they're checking the COVID certs, and they have apps and stuff that the Americans are so efficient, especially New York. They have an app that's like, it's a New York COVID app or whatever, and you have your cert, your COVID cert in there, you have your ID, And you need to use that as well. Like you can have your the last time you were tested or whatever. So you literally walk up to a bar and you just go scroll, one. Like here, it's like, you know, a whole process before you kind of do anything. But yeah, it's a weird look. It's been in a full room there now, a 3,500 seater, packed at Bill Maher. It was a bit weird, but also at the same time, like people have to exist, you know. Like the focus is bottlenecked onto COVID now for everything and everyone, and it's dominating the news coverage. It's dominating people's daily thoughts, and other shit hasn't stopped going wrong.
No,
there's still some other issues in the world, you know.
I know, yeah. But tell me this, because you've always been sporty throughout the you know, as you were saying, through you're playing GA and stuff. What has changed then? Because you are right muscly, and you still aren't good. But have you noticed here now? I need to back off the muscle mass going forward, like because we're close, probably to the same age and whatnot.
Yeah.
Is there an idea that you don't want to be that guy and, you know, taking off his shirt at 58 on Instagram, like, or where you're massive? Like, did you ever find an addiction level almost to muscle mass? Is what I'm saying, like, because there is a time like where for people, you know, you're getting into good nick, you're like, fuck it, this is going great, you know. Or have you decided, no, we're going to go more cardio, more, you know, more, I want to get myself more wiry looking?
I've never structured it. Like, that's the thing.
Have you not? Because you strike me as a fella that would, like.
No, I mean, I definitely have addiction issues when it comes to exercise, for sure. And like, I have addiction issues when it comes to like certain protein bars and Coke Zeros. I find something I like and I fucking stick to it.
You want all of it? Yeah,
but I mean, early on, like a couple of years, we moved into this house about a year and a half ago, myself and my girlfriend, and when like obviously you couldn't go to gyms, and that was a big freaker for me. I freaked out, massively freaked out. I had a background previously in running ultramarathon, so I was used to, oh, you don't grind for X amount of hours, then you haven't worked out. So I was changing that mindset a little bit. But I bought an assault bike, I bought a Rogue Echo bike, I bought a rower, an ERG rower, and I bought more recently I bought a bike as well, one of those, a Concept 2 bike as well. And I have like so for the first say 6-7 months of everything that was going on, at least where I am now, and from like July onwards, August onwards, I was just doing like ridiculous amounts of pull-ups and going on the assault bike or the bike for like maybe an hour. Or I'll do a really, really long interval session on the Concept 2 bike. So I'm doing a lot of cardio, but I'm trying to mix it up. My diet's never been great. But what, like, the mindset has had to shift because I'm 40 next year. And the mindset has had to shift because I just find, like, you know, I'm cramping a bit more now. I'm like, you know, injuries happen a bit. That's what happened in MMA. Like one of the last like serious sessions I did when I first went freelance, I went to a wrestling class, and we just come back from Kilkenny. So I was literally out of the car. So I've been in the car for a couple of hours, went to a grappling class, and I went one way and my knee went the other way. And it just it took that bit longer to heal. So like, it was more understanding how to recover a bit more and understanding, oh, I need to be drinking more water. I was just an idiot and like didn't stretch and would just go and run and try and lift weights or whatever. But it's understanding that I'm definitely getting a bit more structured the older I get. Yeah. But even then, I don't, like, I measure my heart rate. Like, I have a WUP strap and I measure my heart rate as I'm training, so I can make sure I'm staying in a certain zone or whatever for the cardiovascular stuff. But yeah, I've never structured it. I've never properly, I'm going to do this workout today, I'm going to do that workout today. I'm like, throw that pre-workout in 2 scoops. And then like an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I'm like, I want to die, but I feel good about it. So
well, again, I suppose that kind of leans into your authenticity. I suppose you're like, I'm just going to try and stay in shape, lads, and not actually aim for anything in particular, because who gives a bollocks? Like, you know, I'm just going to, you know, keep myself healthy or whatnot. Well,
you can get obsessed with that stuff, especially if you've got an addictive personality, like I certainly do. And that, you know, you're weighing yourself every day. And I've had to do that for cutting weight for fights and stuff. So I understand it. And it's a bad habit to get into because, like, I've weighed 7-8 kilos more than I do now. And that's probably been muscle. You know, if you're weighing, you just, higher bad. You know, like, it's, you know, the way people's brains work sometimes. So I try and train till I feel like I can't train anymore, which, again, not the most scientific way of doing things. But like, and it's difficult now because I'm in a full-time job now. And when I was freelance, it was great. Like, I worked out like it was my job for about 6 months. Because like, I had literally nothing else to do. I was doing bits and bobs for like freelance, but like, when we were in lockdown, I would literally train. I'd get up, be like, right, I have to train today, and like obsessively train for 2.5 hours for over a course of a couple of months. And then, you know, that's just not feasible when you're working full time. Like, you know, I'm going to dip off now for 2 hours and do, you know, pull something in my back and not be able to sit properly in the seat when I'm on a Zoom call with somebody.
You haven't been tempted to go the Joe Rogan route and get an ice bath or out the back, or
if we can afford it, yeah. If we can afford it, I spent enough money now on all the equipment I already have. So that's definitely something I'll like, you know, I think my 40s will be more the investment in the how to recover and not be absolutely bunched like that night or cramping up that morning or wherever. So yeah, it's common sense, I suppose.
It's interesting, like, because I remember talking my grandfather, he got to the 100 mark and he decided, that's it, I'm done. And a month later he died, but in the most relaxed way, just kind of went, that's it, now I got me check. But I remember asking him, like, going, like, the fuck, he didn't take a fucking multivitamin. He ate like 4 different meals. That was it. And you're kind of going, what? How do you get there? Like, and he had no real answer other than his whole thing was no stress. Just do everything on your terms. That was his literal thing. And he literally died on his terms. He went, that's me now. I went, you're grand, you'll get to 101. The fuck do I want that for? Don't get another check at 101, do I? I was like, fair point. And a month later, he was like, look, and he was gone.
It must just be genetics. I think certain people are just kind of built a certain way. And, you know, excuse me, like if it's something like, because you hear about so many things, like my girlfriend's always saying to me, like, you can get cancer from those things as chemicals and that
yeah. Oh Christ, I know.
I'm eating like a Twix and a protein bar, but like, what? Like, it's just nice though. And so I mean, there's a certain amount of caution that obviously you have to kind of have day to day with certain things that are going to be bad for your health. But at the same time, you know, there's always a story like your grandfather who's like, I did me for 100 years, and you know.
But I think he was right. And what I was kind of getting to was the underlying anxiety that you're talking about that's being pumped into society at the minute. Like, that man, he couldn't give a shit about anything. He did everything on his terms, even in arguments. Yeah. They weren't even arguments. It was just, he was saying things, and that's how it's happening now. And walk off. Just go, no, I will never forget going with him one day and to get it. It was a thing. It was actually for my mother. It was like do you remember the old the KitchenAid things? She had one for years, and something blew in it. He went with me to the place where you get these things fixed, and this angry old witch that everybody knows not to go near. And when she said, she was at the front desk, and without even looking up, she's like, yeah, I'll get your man to have a look at it next week. And he just tapped on the counter. This is like 97. He tapped on the counter. I'll be in tomorrow for it. Thanks. But there was something in his look that the woman just went, Grant, I'll get him to look at it now. I don't know what it was, 97 years of perfecting that look of, I don't give a shit what you're saying, and I'm in no way getting stressed, but I'll see you tomorrow, and I'm assuming it will be fixed. There was no backward step at all in his mind. But I think it's the stress thing is probably one of the best things we could try and avoid, you know, that kind of way.
Yeah, and that's hard at the moment, I think.
That's it, yeah.
There's only so much escapism you can kind of do day to day. And look, I think a major issue at the moment is that like a lot of people have done like quite well out of pandemic, whether you're Jeff Bezos, whether you're a reporter who's got a huge following or whatever is off the back of it. I think it's natural kind of human inclination to all want to double up on that stuff and want to keep the following and want to keep the ridiculous amount of money you're making or whatever it is if you're Jeff Bezos. I think it's inherent in people to be like, oh, I want to keep this up, I want to keep doing this, I can't dip off.
Yes, yeah.
And that's a major issue when it comes to something like giving people the news, because there's so much noise at the moment. There is so much noise, and for people to try and differentiate between what's bullshit and what's real and what's the actual news and what's like, we're living in a post-Trump world now. Really, it's all, and every second thing can be fake news or can be branded fake news.
Yes,
it's so important to get people to try and understand some semblance of like those people that are engaged and those people that will feel that anxiety and will feel that stress. It's because like I don't have the capacity to look at some of the stuff I'm looking at and go understand the different charts and all of this stuff around case numbers and around variants and that type of stuff. So it's that element of, you know, who can you trust? Who is giving it to us straight? Who is not just looking for fucking retweets?
Yeah.
What's real here? What's the, you know, and that just seems to have happened less and less. Those places just seem to be more and more like kind of scanting out to find within everything that's going on, because look, I can't imagine what it would have been like on fucking Twitter had World War II. Had Twitter
Oh my God.
the war would probably still be going on, you know, like,
Yeah.
so it's a strange time. And if you can like figure out a way of dealing with that, like been able to look at it, been able to consume it, because again, somebody like me, I have to, and kind of compartmentalize it to some degree. But I had a guy called Derek Thompson on the show in June, and a really smart guy. He writes for The Atlantic, and he was excellent guy, and he does stuff with Bill Simmons now in The Ringer. He has a podcast with him, but he's written really well on COVID and on the pandemic since the start of it. And this guy was ahead of the curve on so much stuff early on. He just spoke to the right people and was able to articulate it and communicate it in a way that I think a lot of people understood. And I spoke to him in June. He kind of called everything, like I said, look, in 6 months' time, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of called everything that's going to happen now, as if kind of saying, look, at a certain point, this is going to be endemic. This is how they work. But also, you know, like a cold isn't, you know, colds like evolve and come back and immunity wanes. It just happens every single year, you know. But if that's not to say that like this isn't serious and that cases aren't serious and all that stuff, of course they are. But there needs to be perspective. And his point was, you need to call out the bullshit. Because I said that, I was like, look, if it bleeds, it leads. I've been doing this for 15 years. I understand that. I've seen traffic spike, you know, for the most ridiculous stories with the most ridiculous headlines. And he was like, people need to call that out. That needs to be called out. And that's happening less and less now. And I think it's taken somebody like Trevor Noah did a little bit recently. I was really excited when Trevor Noah took over the Daily Show. I'm a huge fan of Jon Stewart.
Yes, yeah.
And when Trevor Noah took over the Daily Show, they kind of tried to cancel him for old tweets right away. So it took him a while. Brilliant guy, really good interviewer as well. Really good interviewer, very smart guy. But he was on the show recently and he said something about, there was this other way to do that media clip and then he does the commentary on it.
Yes, yeah.
There was a media clip around the guy, the Moderna CEO, talking about how many more boosters we're going to need. And like, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but Trevor Noah was like, why are we fucking asking him?
Yeah.
He's going to say we need more.
Yeah.
And then he's getting called an anti-vaxxer and shit on Twitter. You're like, that's common sense.
Yeah.
So, or it took Jon Stewart to go on Stephen Colbert a few months back, and he produces that show. Obviously, Colbert started with him. But to be he said something along the lines of like, you know, if there's an explosion of chocolate in a town and that town has a chocolate factory, you know, you might go, maybe this came from the chocolate factory. you know, there's a chocolate factory there. It's, you know, so, you know, I think it's in relation to Wuhan and all that stuff. But the point being, you have to be able to look at other ideas feasibly with common sense and not be attached to like some sort of weird ideology because it means you're on a team. And that comes back to being authentic as well. Oh, people will like me if I say this, or I'll get more clicks if I have breaking hashtag.
Yeah.
Every second fucking tweet or whatever it is. So I'm jaded, Tom. Can you tell I'm jaded?
I can. But you know what? I think sometimes like there's a key for every lock. And I was messaging the lads from Foil Arms and Hogged, and they've always done, you know, well-rounded things that are appealable to almost the entire. They haven't poked any bears with most of their comedy, their sketch comedy, even though it's hilarious. Now the live stuff, yes, but not many stuff you put out. But they did one or two in the last couple of weeks, and they've started to lean into it a small bit. Like definitely, it was the naming of Omicron. If you look for that one, that sketch, and you're like, oh, fair play to the boys here, because it's calling bullshit on an awful lot of stuff, like which the lads are totally capable. But you know what? Because they've set their stall out with so many of the public, it's a nice way of just, rather than swinging with a sledgehammer, because I don't think people can take a sledgehammer. They just can't. But the boys have come in a nice way. They've come in and started calling bullshit on some of this stuff, but done it in a very soft, subtle, kind of sneaky, comedic way. There's no denying it's very fucking funny, like, you know.
But I think that's how people will understand it. Like that was the brilliance in Jon Stewart. That's the brilliance in, you know, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the South Park lads.
Yeah.
And what they do. If you can entertain people while making a point, you know, like whether you really mean it or not. If you watch some of the writers' room stuff on South Park, there's a documentary called 6 Days to Air.
Yes.
Lads, like, and it's just they're working on a level that I can't comprehend. But you know what the Foil Arms and Hog Boys are doing as well is that they kind of have that audience there. Once they make them laugh, you know, once they kind of keep that audience engaged, keep them laughing, then if they make the odd points, you know what I mean? If there's an odd
Yeah.
pointed in there, then like kind of all the power to them, but it's still a joke, you know? Like it's
Yeah,
still,
it's still funny.
This isn't current affairs, lads. Like, you know what I mean? This is still a sketch.
Yeah. Have you ever found yourself, because obviously you're in the media and so, have you ever found yourself almost having to be careful? Or do you just go, fuck it. It is what I am, like, you know, like, because there was that whole thing. It's not, I don't know, is it waning? But there was that whole thing maybe 2 years ago where it's talking about toxic masculinity and whatnot and all the rest of it. And I know Peterson was at the forefront, and he was the whipping boy for people that wanted to give out about these things. But you know what I mean? Like, you look after yourself and stuff like that. You're clearly a bloke, but at the same time, you're still a very well-spoken, nice bloke. But was there ever a point where you had to kind of sidestep that bullshit, or do you just go, fuck off, you know?
I try to think of things in a very contextual way. Like, I try and think of things from, like, it's very easy to demonize people, right?
Yeah.
And some people are just pieces of shit and need to be demonized. That goes without saying. But also, you're not going to change anybody's mind by attacking them. So, like, if I disagree with somebody or something around, like, I don't quite understand the phrase toxic masculinity. Like, I don't understand it. Like, I've always tried, and this is what it comes back to, like, I've tried to be a genuinely decent person, whether I'm like, because I've staff now, I've had staff in other publications I've ran. I've tried to be a genuinely decent person and a decent boss. I've tried to do that. And, like, I'm sure sometimes I haven't been, but that's my context. So if somebody's calling out, I don't know, I don't say any names, or somebody's calling out somebody on something else about toxic masculinity, I don't relate that to myself.
Yes.
So I'm not like, oh wait, that could be me, and then lose the plot, you know? Like, I'm like, but some of it definitely is frustrating, and some of the calling out is definitely virtue signaling, 100%. And you can always tell that, especially the lads that do it. You can.
That's what I mean. These white knights that do it. Yeah.
And like that it always comes back to those. It's always those lads. It is
creepy bastards.
You know, it's like you ask around about those boys, and you'll generally find out a few things about them, I'd say. But yeah, like, I've never been, like, I don't know, one for a better phrase, triggered by it, but it's certainly frustrating. But you do try and understand people's context, and like, I always try and do that. Like, I didn't do a Delver. I'd love to get her on, but I interviewed her a few years ago for a paper, and Megan Phelps.
Oh yeah.
Roper, and she was in the Westboro Baptist Church for years. And I'd urge anybody to look up her TED Talk. She's a brilliant TED Talk. And she's one of the most fascinating people I've ever spoken to. I read her book, and really good book too. And she talks about how she got out of the Westboro Baptist Church. And she was in all the early Louis Theroux docs and pick it up saying the worst shit imaginable, horrible, horrible stuff. And you could see her kind of waning when Louis Theroux went back a little bit. She wasn't as sure, but she was still holding the pickguards. She was still, you know, protesting, you know, dead soldiers' funerals and shooting victims and all that type of stuff. But what got her out of that church was kindness. Like, people started engaging with her on social media. And I think some Dutch documentary filmmakers started engaging with her. And she said, like, look, if people had have kept demonizing me, I'd still be in that church. But it took somebody, like, being curious and asking me a question, and they're like, why? Like, help me understand your point of view, for her to be like, oh, this is really fucked up. And to kind of come out of, you know, one of the worst groups at least in Western civilization, you can't say the world, some fucked up places. But that always stuck with me, and I found it really, really profound in how she spoke about it, and that, like, somebody tried to understand her. Somebody tried to be like, look, she was born into this. She's not somebody who, you know, I think read a few books and was like, yeah, fuck it, actually, this born into it. She grew up with it. She was raised with it. Like, that's not something that kind of changes overnight. So, and look, I've been guilty. I've been, like, reactionary to stuff too. I'm like, that's a piece of shit.
Yes.
But it always comes back to try and understand where people are coming from, no matter what they're kind of saying. Now, look, again, fucking Ted Bundy's a serial killer. Nobody needs to understand. You know what I'm saying? So there's always a line. But yeah, it's a funny phrase. I think the toxic masculinity phrase is a funny phrase. Like, I expected to get more shit over interviewing Jordan Peterson or over interviewing somebody like Sean Spice, who's kind of still friendly with Trump, than I got. But I think it was how I spoke to them. Like, both men, and I'm not putting Spicer and Peterson in the same basket, but just for argument's sake, like, how I dealt with both interviews was to challenge them, like, in a very, let them say their piece, and then to kind of challenge them after and go, well, actually, I think this, but anyway, and I'll move on. You know, I'm not going to be like, well, fucking you're wrong, and then try and get them to change their minds.
Yes, yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Not at all.
And the ego it would take to try and get, Sean Spicer to change his mind about gerrymandering.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So it's a hard, and it's an easy thing, I think, to get caught up in, to see stuff like that and to assume that, these words been thrown around are about you because you're a guy, or, you think, oh, well, I'm quite laddish. Like, are they talking about me or whatever? Well, it doesn't matter. Like, if you're a decent person day to day, if you're not a piece of shit, you do nice things and don't tweet about doing nice things.
Yeah.
You just fucking do them. And, there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. What was Spicer like? I mean, did you get to talk to him a little off? I mean, it seemed like almost a very civil chat. I won't call it an interview. It seemed like a very civil chat that you had. What did you pick up from him when you were speaking to him? Because he was vehement in what he was saying, and that he thinks Trump will, if he runs again, he'll get in. You can, there's certain points from the media, the likes of him will be, perpetuated as being a lunatic to buy into this notion, all the rest of it. But he said it wasn't sensationalized. Your interview wasn't like coming up next with Mike Sheridan. Do you know, it was
more of that and get more views.
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't watch it if for nobody else, Mike, for me, you did it honestly.
I mean, it was a tricky one for me because I've done a lot of political stuff, especially over the last couple of years, like a lot of political interviews, and I mean US political stuff. I have a guy this week called Brian Tyler Cohn, who is he's huge in Democratic space. He's an activist, but he's like over 1 million subs, and you've definitely seen his videos if you look at anything political. He does these direct to cameras. He's interviewed everybody, like current White House officials. He had the chief of staff, Joe Biden's chief of staff, on last week, and he'd be the other side to the coin that Sean Spicer was last week. And he was a hard one to kind of get a read on, really, to be honest. Like, I think he kind of started the interview a little bit. I mean, look, if you looked at my Twitter feed, I'm sure you'd realize, politically, we probably don't align. And I'm not one to really tweet political views or anything like that, but I'm assuming you could probably tell, But at the same time, I try to understand his points.
Yeah.
I've read a bunch of books on Donald Trump. I've read a lot of stuff on Donald Trump. And what I kind of came back to, I mean, I've had a few kind of back and forths with a few different, relatively well-known people as well, about him. People would probably consider themselves critical thinkers, but it'd probably be a bit more contrarian than anything else.
Yes, yeah.
My point around the Donald Trump subject, and my point was, I've spoken to a lot of people who worked with him, and were in the White House with him, and who are like, you shouldn't be doing this job. Or like, lads, trust me, he should not be doing this fucking job, And then so for Sean Spicer to be like, well, I think he's going to win again. I think he's going to run in 24. I think he's going to win it. Everybody thinks that, by the way. So anybody I've spoken to thinks, what Brian Tyler Cohn said to me was like, he doesn't want to be the kingmaker. He wants to be the king. He doesn't have the propensity to hand over the ego and not run. So understanding that's important, because if he does run and win again, you're going to need to understand these people. Now, there's an element of the Republican Party, and Spicer would be part of that, who are they want to be on a winning team.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
If you call Trump out, you're dead to him. It's all ego. You're gone to him. Complete narcissism. You're just completely gone to him. So I was understanding that perspective from Spicer, trying to understand it, but also realizing as well, he's a human being.
Yeah.
And when I did kind of when we did kind of discuss certain points or kind of talk around certain things, I mean, he was he made the argument I think most politicians or most political types would make, it be like, well, Democrats do that too. so they call for violence and the rhetorics, all of that stuff. So it's one of those that I could have argued with him, literally. I could have sat there arguing with him until he hung up on me, or I hung up on him, or whatever. But it's not a conversation. That's not discourse.
Yes, yeah.
That's making myself feel, oh, look, I fucking told him, and then getting some retweets. I don't know, but I enjoyed the conversation with him, and we left laughing, we left smiling. I'm trying to get him on the show. I've been trying to get him on the show for ages. He was supposed to be the launch guest a couple of years ago, and it ended up being Bill Burr, which could be worse. But Beto O'Rourke is a guy I followed for now since the start of a Senate run in Texas, and I was running for governor in Texas. So we have a bet, myself and Sean Spicer, that Beto will. He doesn't think he stands a chance, and I think he's got a decent chance of getting in of governor in Texas. So, we're talking about bringing over people to Dublin as well when when like it's kind of feasible, I suppose, and kind of having events and having these conversations live too, and giving the audience an opportunity to ask questions. So the likes of somebody like Sean Spicer or somebody like that, I think would be brilliant for that, you know. So that's kind of where we left the conversation, and we kind of most of the time, like you'll kind of chat away for a couple of minutes afterwards and be like, look, kind of thanks a mil. But yeah, there was no animosity, I don't think. I mean, he certainly didn't tweet out the interview. I'd say that.
Yeah, you know.
So I mean, you know, he works for Newsmax, so which is if you can watch Newsmax live on YouTube. And I watched the show before the interview, obviously, and like it's certainly like different. It's very American, but like there's mainstream news networks that would be considered left leaning that aren't far off that stuff. Like
yeah,
you know?
Yeah, of course.
Like,
and the live shows, I wanted to ask you about that. Like, was that when did that? Because there's a performer in that. It isn't just the same as talking to somebody over Zoom or whatever. You need to be very much aware that there's an audience. Do you love that?
Well, I mean, any of the live stuff I've done, it's like, and my deputy editor actually in Buzz, Darren Murphy's a comedian as well. And I always say it to him, I'm like, what you guys do is the most terrifying fucking thing in the world to me, right? Just to go out there on your own, you know, wherever you're going and making people laugh. Like, it's on you, it's on your stories. And I get there's a certain amount of repetition and stuff that's involved with that to put you in the comfortable space that, you know, certain things are going to get laughs. I walk out cold and I'm like, here's some lads and I'm going to talk to them, you know. That's any of that stuff I've done. I've done a bunch of live shows around Ireland. And they've always been interviews.
Yeah.
So they've always been conversations, and I'm really comfortable with that part of stuff. The cold opens in the likes of Vicar Street. Like the first show we did for Rory and Ray's shows were Vicar Street. And like, I haven't been in a fucking room with that many people walking out then to people, like, and I'm not a comedian. I'm far from it. So I just try and keep it short and then get the conversation going. Like if I'm good at anything, it's keeping people in a comfortable space that they feel like they can share things and have that conversation. Or with Ray and Rory, it was like they're making sure they were hitting their points, they were getting through the pillars that they wanted to talk about. They're very clear about what they wanted to talk about. And I've done other stuff with, like, David Rudolph was in did a tour with him. He was a lawyer. He's a book coming out, actually. He was a lawyer in The Staircase, that Netflix show.
Yes, yeah.
So, like, and you know, we did 9 or 10 shows, I think, around different parts of the country. And at a certain point, when you're doing that many, or you're doing them kind of back to back, you hit a certain groove. But I'd love to do more. Like, I love, like, Bob Woodward came over a couple of years ago. Fintan O'Toole got it. But I'd love to have sat down with him and interviewed him in front of an audience, because like, he is the, like, I've read, you know, at least all of his books on Trump, and I read one of his older books as well, obviously All the President's Men. But like, just like GOAT, like that word GOAT, the greatest of all time in terms of journalism. And he has 3 sources for everything, and just the stories he has since the Nixon days, and you know, all of that shit that went down in the 70s and to now, and to Trump used to call him in the middle of the night, like, just like rambling phone to him when he was writing the second to last book, you know. And then to like talk to, like, I spoke to Jake Tapper, and to speak to Jake Tapper and him talk about Bob Woodward as if, like, you know, it's just, so yeah, he's like that. I'd like to go down that road a bit more, just because it comes easy to me. Like those type of conversations, especially the political stuff, it comes very, very easy to me. The movie stuff, the kind of interviewing actors or whatever, I kind of take case to case. I didn't do them for a long time because I didn't have to. There was like a Brian Lloyd in entertainment and Dean Malumbi in entertainment.ie who work for me, who are like both very good at it. You know, they're the movie people, so I let them do it. Buzz doesn't quite have that yet, so at a certain point, I'm sure I'll pass them on to the other lads, and I'll just do the kind of longer ones and the kind of ones I think I can get something out of somebody with. Deadly.
So Trump next year for the 3 arenas. Is that what you're telling me? You're going to have him on stage. You're going to grill him for an hour.
I would, like, any fucking journalist, Tom, who tells you they would not interview Donald Trump is talking out of their ass.
Of course. I mean, the crack alone, like, the after party be savage. Let's be honest.
I will say, like, Piers Morgan is somebody who gets a lot of shit, and he's deserved it a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
But his interview with Trump was nowhere near as bad as everybody was letting on. Well, Piers, like, you got loads of me giving an Arsenal jersey and all that a few years ago. But like, Piers Morgan knew the man, and he knew if he played up to him a little bit, you get more from him.
Yeah,
and he did. You know, so I'd fucking love to interview Donald Trump 100%. Like, no, 3 arena now. Somebody's definitely going to throw something. I don't think I'd have Secret Service protection, so if I'm available, you know, they can reach out.
So the Delve, I mean, is there a blast more coming out of the Delve in the next while?
Yeah, I've got Brian Tyler Cohen's going out today. So that one, by the time people listen to this or watch this, that one will be out. I'd encourage people to listen to that one because he's the other side of the coin to Sean Spicer, and he's a superstar in that democratic space in the US. I've got Adam McKay, who's a director, won an Oscar.
Yeah.
He directed Voice. He just directed the new Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence movie, Don't Look Up. Did the Anchorman movies, like produced the Succession, like a brilliant guy, like brilliant guy. And so, but that's just going to be audio, I think, because of where he's going to be in the world. But that's going to be a pod that'll probably be going to just before Christmas. So they're coming up. I'm trying to get a bit more. I'm trying to get some more, like, kind of not local, but I'm trying to speak to some kind of higher ranking Irish politicians. I'm trying to move into that area so we can.
Danny Healy-Rae. I'm just 2022.
I interviewed Al Gore a few years ago, and I mentioned it was Danny Healy-Rae and Michael Healy-Rae, but they were like, they're climate change deniers, you know. I had a conversation with Al Gore about Noah's Ark.
That is the trifecta we need to get. Mike Sheridan, Danny Healy-Rae, and Al Gore on stage in Vickers Street.
It's up there if people want to look for it. But yeah, talking about Noah's Ark and Danny Healy-Rae to Al Gore is definitely I don't know if I'd say career highlight, but it's a career something. There's more of them coming. So we'll have probably 5 or 6 in total this side of Christmas, and then like kind of after Christmas as well, I'll try and keep them rolling as well. I'm running Buzz as well, so it's not as easy to get the time to kind of chase people and kind of set up the interviews and then have them filmed and edited and all that stuff. So, but there should be more coming.
Class stuff. And where's the best place to grab it? Over on buzz.ie?
YouTube. So like if you want to delve, like definitely check out buzz.ie because it's a rebooted version of an old site called Buzz, and it's like I'm really proud of what the journalists and stuff what we're doing there. We're trying to do like non-reactionary alarmists. I
like how your stuff too. Also, you have no leading you've no headlines that go, we can't handle these chicken wings in Dublin. I'm going, oh, watch it. Collectively, you went around the office and you all realized you couldn't handle the chicken wings in Elephant and Castle. Can you not? Okay, fair enough. All right.
We're not going to be. It's never going to be one of those sites that does the type of numbers that some of the other sites do, and I'm fine with that because we're trying to explain things. Really, we're trying to like kind of, you know, it's not if a shooting happens somewhere like in my old neighborhood or something like that, we're not going to cover that. It's not what we do.
Yeah.
But the kind of bigger stuff we're going to cover and explain our form. That's what we're trying to do there, and like. So the delve has kind of been absorbed a little bit into Buzz, for as long as I'm there at least, and and then we amplify the interviews then in some of the like Reach Ireland on Buzz, so in some of their newspapers and stuff as well. So you do like check out Buzz for sure, but if you want the delve, the best place to get the delve, I haven't updated the pods yet, but the YouTube that's where all the interviews are. Just search the delve on YouTube and they're all there.
Very easy to find. Mike Sheridan, absolute champion. Thanks a million.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Cheers, dude.